I'm Paul DeRienzo with the news. The plot thickens in the skies over New Jersey as sightings of unidentified aircraft, often said to be drones, increased over the weekend. President-elect Donald Trump accused the Biden administration of knowing more about the drones than they're letting on, adding, "Something is going on." Trump has declined to visit his golf course at home in Bedminster, New Jersey, because of the sightings. Earlier Tuesday, lawmakers attended a classified House Intelligence Committee briefing on the drones. Meanwhile, the mayor of Belleville, New Jersey, Michael Melham, has been giving interviews claiming the drones may be a government search for a missing radioactive source. The missing source was reported lost on December 3rd. It's used as a reference by various legitimate devices, but illustrates a long-standing concern by the military with the use of radioactive sources by malign figures in so-called dirty bombs. But it's probably, in itself, not very dangerous. Melham added the government has not been cooperative, has not been really responding to questions that have come from local officials as to what's really been going on in the skies above New Jersey. General Pat Ryan, a spokesperson at the Pentagon, brushed aside a reference by one reporter to the sci-fi film 2001: A Space Odyssey, with his own reference to the popular Star Wars character Obi-Wan Kenobi. So New York has this radioactive nightmare. And it's something else to worry about in New York, as if we don't have enough here. Radiological survey maps of the New York, New Jersey area made with data collected by government helicopters in January 2014 were recently released. Sports stadiums and transportation hubs were the main, but not the only focus of the surveys, which were turned over in response to a Freedom of Information Act request by this reporter. No reason was given for why certain maps were withheld and others released. The FOIA was filed about 2016 or so. The maps signal the first time that the public had seen the results of the government's ongoing efforts to create a background radiation survey of the entire New York metropolitan area. Similar surveys of Washington, D.C. and Boston have been conducted, and a couple of low-resolution maps of those cities are on government websites. Background radiation is significant because there are places in and around the city, hospitals, clinics, construction sites, and the like, that already give off so much radioactivity that they might confuse first responders in an emergency. Regular surveys in New York apparently began in 2005 when the NYPD first requested the Department of Homeland Security do the job. A few years after the survey was done, it was reported that the flyover has found 80 spots in the city with elevated radioactivity. The cops claim most of the radiation was the result of the granite bases of statues, because granite naturally emits some radiation. But notably, it was also discovered that soil in a 500-acre Staten Island park called Great Kills contained radium. The park was eventually closed pending a preliminary study of the contamination. It's believed radium, which is highly radioactive, but that the waste from milling radium for use in medical supplies and medical equipment was mixed with landfill and used in the 1940s to build the park. The radiation monitoring flyovers are conducted by the Aerial Measuring System, an arm of the Department of Energy. The Bell 412 model helicopters crisscross the city about 150 feet in the air while traveling around 80 miles per hour and record natural and man-made radiation levels bombarding residents. Maps created from the survey data can then be compared to later surveys to help find any added radiation. Dr. Kimberly Kiroft is a professor of nuclear engineering and radiological sciences at the University of Michigan. Kiroft exclaimed, "Way cool," when she saw the maps. "The maps would be very valuable," she said, in case of an attack or a nuclear accident similar to what happened at Fukushima in Japan. She warned that a complete set of radiation survey maps could direct potential terrorists to locations where radioactive sources are kept, usually under strict security. That's why she believes some of the maps were not released. These 19 maps, which cover sports stadiums, railroad stations, and the entirety of Jersey City, indicate that radiation levels at these sites are mostly close to the natural background levels. But there are some areas of concern. That's according to Dr. Kiroft. While some of the maps are labeled exposure rate and show the total amount of background radiation, others are labeled man-made counts per second. These maps, said Kiroft, are well done, although she wasn't sure what they meant by man-made. Kiroft added she thinks government scientists were able to separate naturally occurring radiation for what she called technologically enhanced naturally occurring material, radioactive stuff that's been altered by some manufacturing process. She added that hospitals and nuclear reactors occasionally make tiny releases of radiation. So I'm presenting later in this video, I'm going to present the maps in brief. They're available at my website at medium.com for a little closer observation. So I'm going to go through each map that had something of interest, and a description was returned from Professor Kiroff as to what she thought was going on. Not all the maps showed anything of great interest, but some of them definitely caught the doctor's eye. The first one at the top is Yankee Stadium. And I'm going to list, we all know what that is. Some might have been on another planet for a few years, but Yankee Stadium is a sports stadium. It's located in the Bronx, New York. It's home of the New York Yankees. It has a capacity of 50,000 people. There were two types of maps provided for each of the sites in New York and New Jersey, as I stated earlier. The man-made counts per second map of Yankee Stadium is well done, says Kiroff, but difficult to interpret. It probably means radiation from technological sources, not just normal background radiation, was in the area. It's hard to tell, she says, if the radiation levels shown are significant, without more information such as the actual spectrum showing the elements causing the radiation. She pointed to an area south of the Cross Bronx Expressway showing radiation levels 2.3 times nothing. The levels, she added, suggest a hospital or facility nearby. It's also possible that an aircraft could pass through a cloud of radiation from another source, giving a false reading. Kiroff was also concerned about the activity along Sheridan Avenue. It would take spectrum analysis and folks walking through the area to get what she called the radiological history of the area, what past factories, medical facilities, or warehouses may have been there. Next site was in Jersey City, New Jersey, population 250,000, second largest city in the state. The two radiological flyover maps of Jersey City include a man-made count, or map, and an exposure rate, or ER map. The ER map shows the total radiation exposure over a given location. Natural background levels vary and are not too different from the rates shown in this map of Jersey City until you get to a bright red spot on Patterson Plank Road. Kiroff said, "Jersey City looks pretty good," referring to the spot in question, which she said is about 10 times the natural level of radiation for the area. Although radiation could possibly be from a different location, she suggested a tour of the area to see if any hospitals or oncology labs may be nearby. Also, she added, a person who has recently received iodine treatments for thyroid disease could set off an alarm by just walking past the location being observed. A quick look at the site on the red blob on Google Maps showed a facility for the biotech firm LabCorp across the street from a busy public park surrounded by working-class housing. Then there was the Jets practice field, located in Florham Park, New Jersey. It's the training field for the New York Jets football team. Florham Park has a population of about 12,000. On this map of the New York Jets football team training field in Florham Park, it's a popular destination where the famed football team can be seen training. It attracts ticket holders who flock to see their heroes preparing for the next game. Kiroff's sharp eye was drawn to the lower right and upper left of the map near the College of St. Elizabeth. She said at 15 microrem per hour, the area is double the natural background radiation levels. What's going on? She asked herself softly. Kiroff adds that these radiation levels are low compared to Native American tribes in South Dakota. On the Lakota reservation, she's helped find areas contaminated by uranium mining. At a school playground in South Dakota, she measured, together with a BBC film crew, levels of 1,770 microrem per hour, high enough to evacuate areas near the Fukushima nuclear meltdown. The United States, by law, claims that any amount of radiation, even small amounts, can be considered dangerous. There's no level that is not biologically dangerous under U.S. law. MetLife Stadium, home of the New York Giants and New York Jets, located in East Rutherford, New Jersey, capacity 82,500. Speaking of sports, approximately 85,000 fans were expected to attend Super Bowl 48 on February 2nd, 2014 at MetLife Stadium, a week after the aerial radiological survey was conducted. The Super Bowl was considered a Level 1 security event. A year earlier, 2 bombs that were detonated at the Boston Marathon killed 3 and injured hundreds. The government was at high alert for the Super Bowl that year. Thousands of security officers guarded the event, including snipers, SWAT teams, and fighter jets. The security effort was made up of officials from 35 agencies, including the CIA and NYPD. Media reports said the authorities were ready for a radiological attack by terrorists using a dirty bomb or other weapons. A radiological hotspot is notable as a red blob in the upper right of the photo near, as we said earlier, Patterson Plank Road. Google Maps shows several factory buildings, a health center, a couple of motels, other nondescript buildings at a site just outside the boundary of the Meadowlands Sports Complex. Now, then came the Secaucus train terminal, a major commuter rail hub, part of the proposed Gateway project in Secaucus, New Jersey, handling 26,000 passengers per day. The Meadowlands rail line connects the main hub for numerous mass transit routes in Hoboken with sports events at the Meadowlands. The line is used to get fans to the stadium for events with over 50,000 spectators. The Secaucus train terminal would have been a major hub for the Super Bowl ticket holders using mass transit to get to the game. There are no particularly bright lit up spots on that map showing unusual amounts of radioactivity. There's also a railroad bridge, the HX Draw it's called, at mile 7.7 on the Hackensack River. It provides direct access to the Meadowlands from Secaucus Terminal. The Jackknife Drawbridge crosses the Hackensack River just south of the Meadowlands. It also serves several commuter lines. There is an area of higher background radiation along the water just west of the bridge. Then we come home to New York, Brooklyn, Barclays Center, home of the Brooklyn Nets and New York Islanders. Its location, Brooklyn, New York, capacity about 18,000. Stadium opened in 2012. The sports venue serves many teams, primarily basketball's Nets and hockey's Islanders. This venue had some of the hottest concerts around as well. It sits atop a major transit hub in the middle of a fast-growing part of Brooklyn. The Atlantic Avenue Barclays Center subway station right below the sports center is the busiest in Brooklyn with 14 million users. Again, there was no bright red spots showing increased radiation. Same at Citi Field, which is the home of the Mets, which was also observed by the government. The Prudential Center in New Jersey showed, not much, slightly more pinkish areas, but not showing any significant amounts of radiation. So that is how the government left us. This was, of course, quite a few years ago. It was one of numerous observations, surveys of the New York metropolitan area and New York City, similar to surveys that are done in other cities and important locations around the country. The general purpose is to find the background level of radiation, what normally occurs, so that you don't have first responders rushing to somebody who just had radiation treatment for cancer or heart disease or some other method of doing any investigation of them. There's also use of radioactive materials are used for in construction, and there's many legitimate uses, and some of the sources that are used are quite highly radioactive, potentially dangerous, but usually not so unless the container around them is broken and the internal guts of these radioactive sources are spilled out. There's different types of radiation that present different dangers. But generally, if you just get too much radiation, you can get sick and potentially die. Ingesting radioactive particles like dust in the air that might call usually alpha radiation. It can come from, let's say, uranium dust, breathing it in, or other radioactive dust, contaminated dust that you breathe in gets into your lungs. It's like a tiny X-ray machine going off inside your lungs. It could go there for years and years and years and potentially cause cancerous tumors in your lungs and other parts of your body, similar to tobacco smoke. The general fear is the economic impact, not just the dangers to human beings, but an area that was struck by a radiological device would potentially be unusable. Like a large area could be rendered totally unusable by people until a cleanup could be effectuated. And that, in some cases where it's very, very bad, it could be 100 years. For example, the radioactive contamination that was found in Great Kills Park in 2005 is still, they haven't really even begun some of the major parts of the cleanup. Some of the cleanup has been done, but they really don't give an end date. It could be years. It's already been almost 20 years and it's still going on, which is much longer than we were told it would be. So there is a danger related to radiological devices or radioactive waste or malign figures making use of radioactive waste. You don't have to make an atomic bomb to put a bunch of radioactive waste in a garbage can with an explosive and then having a spray all over the place. You wouldn't even really need to injure the people from the explosion or anything. Nobody would be injured, but the area might be rendered uninhabitable for potentially years, depending on how bad the contamination was. It takes a long time to clean that stuff up. It's very expensive, so it could also be a way, basically a bunch of firecrackers and some stolen radioactive sources could cost billions in damage. So it can be understood the government would have some interest in that. Now, does the aerial survey team that we have in the United States that goes around to these places, is it possible that that they might have switched to drones from using, Bell 412 model helicopters? Those helicopters are, as Professor Kirov said, are outfitted with some of the most high-tech radiation detectors ever developed. They can tell you so much now of the source and type of radiation from just flying over at an altitude of 150 feet. And they go back and forth. You might even see them once in a while. Would the aerial measuring system be switching over to drones instead of using the Bell 412 helicopters to crisscross the city and looking, trying to set up a background for radiation sources? Are they searching for a radioactive source? As I said, that's more difficult than people realize, to search for a radioactive source, because you have to eliminate all the other radioactive sources that are out there. A medical facility could open a window to let in some fresh air just when somebody's clicking a picture, for an x-ray, and the radiation go out the window and flash bright red if they happen to have somebody going over at that moment measuring radiation. And then you would have, basically SWAT the person coming in the door, with SWAT teams and everything, just to find a dentist's office. So they have to be very, very careful about that, because radiation is ubiquitous. It's all around us. And how would you be able to tell the difference between a malign and a proper and legitimate use of such devices? Anyway, that's my take on the drones. I'm following the story, and we'll continue to report on it. I'm Paul DeRienzo, and this is the news with Paul DeRienzo, and it is available here on one of my favorite places. Thanks for listening and watching.